We will we will just give it 30 more seconds to allow people to join the webinar, and then we will get started. So the participant number is climbing up, and we'll just give it a few seconds more to allow everyone to join. All right. On behalf of the Nordic UN Global Compact Networks, I'm very happy to welcome you to this webinar. In this webinar series called Dilemmas in Science-Based Climate Action. Today, we will be talking about what we are labeling the product durability and lifetime emissions dilemma. This is all part of a series. Let me see if I can change the slide. So we have, for more than a year, been working on this project, and we had Rambo join us to dive into three very distinct dilemmas in climate action. And now we have launched three briefs on these intricate climate dilemmas, and now is actually the launch webinar of those briefs. So you can look at today as sort of an introduction to the product durability and lifetime emissions brief to kind of pique your interest, and go into the brief yourself and dive into it and get out of it what you need to get out of it. Obviously, this is a very difficult dilemma we're going to be talking about today. But before we dive into it, I just want to say that this webinar today is one of three webinars that we're going to do about today is obviously the product durability and lifetime emissions dilemma. Tomorrow, we will have a webinar about supply engagement and how to cut emissions and increase adoption of greener materials. And on Thursday, we're going to have a webinar about the science-based targets, flag targets. So it's three very, very different challenges that we've been diving into in this Nordic series. But as mentioned, you can all download the briefs now and have a look at it, and you're very welcome to join the other webinars if you feel like they're relevant for your business. Now, before I present the agenda, I know that there are a couple of participants, a good handful of participants out there that might not be familiar with the UN Global Compact. So just a few words on who we are. We are the world's largest initiative for responsible private sector. We are more than 20,000 companies worldwide. So over 20,000 companies worldwide have committed to the 10 principles of the UN Global Compact. You can see them here in the bottom of the screen. They're within human rights, labor rights, the environment, and anti-corruption. And so we, in the Nordic, we have a local network in each of the Nordic countries, but we work very closely with each other to offer a lot of interesting content. Everything is about capacity building within organizations to make sure that they progress within our 10 principles. If you would like to know more about our business, feel free to, or our organization, feel free to reach out to me after this webinar. All right, and now to today's topic. When we selected what to dive into for this series, it's obviously based on the companies that reach out to us with their challenges and opportunities and solutions. And a number of companies had reached out to me about what they perceive to be the product durability and lifetime emissions dilemma. I was not familiar with it before, but the dilemma in a nutshell is that we are in a situation where, for example, the EU is calling for companies within the union to produce more durable and longer lasting products with a focus on circularity. The challenge is that if you are following the greenhouse gas protocol, and all companies are when they're creating climate accounting, they are required to account for their direct use phase emissions of their products. So the very simple setup here in this dilemma is that the longer the product lifespan, the more emissions associated with using the product a company must account for in their scope 3. So that increases their overall emissions. Now, of course, there are many ways to handle this dilemma, and that is exactly what this brief is about in this webinar here today. But the challenges associated with the dilemma is obviously that some of these companies that experience this challenge might not be able to meet their science-based targets. There is also a low incentive in general to produce longer lasting products. That is, of course, strictly from a greenhouse gas protocol perspective. And there is also, it might be very difficult to obtain accurate use phase emissions data. So if you don't have an accurate picture of your use phase emissions data, it's very difficult to also reduce them. And of course, there are many other topics that we could dive into, but and we will not go into depth with all of them here today. But it's as I mentioned, today's webinar is about introducing the business brief that we've launched, and then hopefully you will be interested in diving into that brief afterwards. We have a very good agenda today. After I'm done with my introduction, I will hand over the word to Fanny Flisbeck, who's the head of department at Strategic Sustainability Consulting in Norway at Rumble Management Consulting. And Fanny will go through the brief. As mentioned before, Rumble has been supporting us in this project from the early stages, and we're very happy to have them on board here today. After Fanny has highlighted some of the key takeaways from the brief, we will hand over the word to Janus Kirkeby, who's head of department Waste and Resource Management at Rumble. We'll be talking a bit about avoided emissions and how that fits into this dilemma. And then we will be handing over the word to Sophie Fess from Nilfisk, and that would be sort of contextualizing the brief into how Nilfisk is experiencing this dilemma. Nilfisk was one of the first companies to raise this issue with us, so we're very grateful for them to have done that. And then finally, I will put a few words on some of the recommendations that we have in the brief that we will pass on to the Greenhouse Gas Protocol. And then hopefully there will be some time for a Q&A and discussion. Some housekeeping rules before we continue. So the webinar, as you have already received a notification, it is being recorded. The recording and the slides from this webinar will be shared with all of the participants. If you have any questions throughout the webinar, please use the Q&A function to submit your questions. You're also welcome to write in the chat, but please, if there are questions for the presenters, please use the Q&A function. You can also upvote questions. If you look through the questions and you find some questions that you also are very eager to get a response to, please upvote that question and we will prioritize it. All right, I think that's it for me. Once again, welcome to this webinar. We're very happy to see so many people. I just want to hand over the word to Fanny Flisbeck from Rumble.
Thank you, Joachim. Then I will share the slides here for starting. So hopefully you can all see the slides now. Just confirm, Joachim.
Yep, we can see it.
Great. So Joachim already introduced me. I'm from Rumble, very happy to be with you today. So just two short slides about Rumble. Maybe most of you have heard about us. We have offices in 35 countries. In Norway, where I'm sitting, we have 17 offices. And what we see as maybe a little bit our uniqueness is that we have the combination of management consulting and the engineering departments within our company. So we are covering the whole project phases from management and strategy to kind of the nuts and bolts of specific projects. And another thing is that we have a very specific strategy about being a partner for sustainable change for our clients. So that goes both for us internally as well, that we have to walk the talk, but also that we are very committed to both choosing projects that are focusing on sustainability, and also that we are working with our clients to look for the most sustainable solutions. So just a little bit about Rampen, and also why we have been very happy to be part of this project together with the UN Global Compact, looking at the different dilemmas that companies are facing becoming more sustainable. So just looking at what are we talking about with this dilemma, this is the same thing as Joachim was introducing you to before, in a little bit more visual addition. So for those of you who remember better, the first thing is, of course, that UN Green Deal, they're asking companies to extend the product lifetime. And at the same time, while companies are reporting through the greenhouse gas protocol, they are aiming at decreasing their scope 3 emissions. And of course, as Joachim was saying, the longer lifetimes of the products, the category 11 scope 3 emissions are increasing. So what are companies to do that want to reach their goals of decreased emissions at the same time as they want to think about the environment and increasing the lifetimes of their products? So we, together with the UN Global Compact, have been looking into this together with Nordic companies that have been working on this. So they have been gotten different kind of, they're not all as far, but they met on these two workshops, learning from each other, discussing the common challenges, possible solutions, and next steps. And so we had two workshops with this theme during the fall, where the companies met together also with some experts from Rumble, and had a very thorough and interesting discussions on this. So the brief that we are launching today is a summary of these discussions, combined with some expertise input from Rumble. So please have a look at the brief and download it. So today we won't be able to go into all of the things that we found during the workshops, but we'll just introduce you to what are the contents, what are the kind of information you can find in the brief, and then you can go and have a closer look at it in the brief themselves. So here, just to introduce you to the brief structure and how you can use it. So firstly, we are looking at the three main challenges and some recommended focus areas within these challenges that we found during the workshops. So this has to do with the greenhouse gas protocol reporting dilemma of this context. So these three challenges are the regulation complexities and lacks of standards, data gathering and data management across the value chains, and also not a challenge, but one of the recommended focus areas, looking at some circularity options that can help mitigate this dilemma. And for each of these three challenges, we have chosen some specific issues that we can focus on, and then sketched up some proposed actions within them. And then we are also including, as Joachim mentioned, a section on how to report on avoided emissions, because of course within the Greenhouse Gas Protocol, the goal is to report on decreased emissions, which of course makes you have to have emissions in the first place, but being able to showcase that we are avoiding emission with your products, that's also a huge benefit. So my colleague Janus will be going through some criteria for reporting avoided emissions and some strategic application and communication regarding this. And this is also in the brief structured with specific issues and proposed actions. And then, kind of as an executive summary, we have sketched up 8 recommendations for businesses. So it could be a place to start looking at, so what are we talking about here? What are the recommendations? How can you tackle this? And then go back and look into more detail in the other areas of the brief. And then this brief has a little bit of a bonus addition here, where the companies during the workshops, they provided some feedback to the Greenhouse Gas Protocol's new technical guidance on Scope 3. So they actually participated from the Greenhouse Gas Protocol and were very eager to hear from the companies what is the dilemma actually, and what does it look like in the companies, and how do they see that they could actually make the protocol better. So that is in there as well. And Joachim will tell you a little bit more about that at the end. But for this, the 3 main challenges, just give you a small overview, a little bit more detail about that. Then the first challenge is this about how to navigate the regulation complexities and lacks of standards. So the dilemma itself is, of course, about product durability and lifetime emissions dilemma. And there is as probably all of you know, a lot of different regulations coming out regarding sustainability. So specifically global companies, they have to navigate a lot of different regulations and different ways of reporting. And then, of course, the lack of standards regarding the dilemma itself is not making this job easier. So 2 of the proposed actions that we suggest that companies can focus on, firstly, is to help instigate industry-wide collaboration on putting up standards. So these standards has to do with product-related metrics and calculations, and it helps with sensibly assessing and comparing the lifespan of products. So it can be assessment of values for product lifetimes. It can be regarding calculation of operational energy use. And another thing that many companies also mentioned during the workshop is how to attribute emissions to individual components within larger structures of, for example, buildings or vehicles. So having industry-wide collaboration on how to do this would help immensely, just for the transparency and being able to, for people to understand what we are talking about regarding this. So this has to do with, of course, just in all the arenas that companies are participating in, to talk about this and see if there are any collaborations that can be established regarding this. But in the meanwhile, before that is put together, then maybe looking at developing and implementing an internal company standardization will help make their own unified metrics and calculation standards. And this will help you be able to compare your different products and also be able to track progress over time regarding this dilemma. And just to mention, one of the things that many of the companies talked about during the workshop regarding this, excuse me, is to use the environmental product declaration for doing this, which will incorporate user scenarios and Scope 3 category emission reporting. So will also help enhance the transparency and accountability within this area. And as I mentioned before, the recommendation for businesses is kind of a summary of this. So it has to do with just implementing and enhancing these standards, both internal and industry-wise. So secondly, the second challenge that we're looking at is how to tackle the data gathering and data management across the value chains. So also probably, as many of you know, all these new reporting regulations and things like that, they're calling for reporting emissions on the whole value chain, hence the scope 1, 2, and 3. And just the sheer volume of data is really difficult to tackle without having a specific system, IT system or digital system to help with this. But then when you're looking at this dilemma in this context, then there's an added complexity in that the data from the user phase is quite difficult to get a hold of. So two of the different areas that companies can focus on regarding this is for systems that are looking at systems that are specifically aiming at gathering data from the use phase. And there are different kind of systems for this, and there are more information about this in the brief. But just as examples, this could be Internet of Things that will help gather information directly from your products. So implementing devices and sensors in the products. And this could be used in a combination with blockchain technology that will help secure the data, combined with data analytics and machine learning systems, help you to make sense of all this data that you're gathering, and so on and so forth. So, but you can see more about this in the brief. And then there's this other part of this regarding the data. And of course, use phase and how people and customers use your products. That is usually not following any standardization. So how to assess this part of the value chain of your product is really difficult. So one way that this could be tackled is to engage engage consumers directly. This could be through feedback mechanisms and other user-centric data collection tools, and this will be able to help you with assessing the use phase of your products. Also, how people are maintaining it and how they are dealing with the end-of-life handling of your products. And another additional benefit with the consumer engagement would be that in addition to enriching your company's data pool, this could possibly also strengthen customer relationship with you and brand loyalty. So it has kind of broader benefits also. And the recommendation kind of also just a summary of this to look at implementing these systems for your products. The last part that I want to mention, the last challenge or focus area is the circularity options that can help alleviate the dilemma. And there are probably more circular business models that would be helpful here, but we chose two that we mentioned. So these two are firstly the product as a service model that has to do with, rather than selling your product, it will be leasing the product and people will be buying the service of it. And the reason that this would be helpful regarding the product durability and lifetime emissions dilemma is that the producers of a product will maintain the ownership of the product throughout the lifetime, and that will make it possible to control the life cycle and facilitate regular maintenance and upgrades and so forth, so that you as a producer can improve the energy efficiency and the use of the product throughout the life cycle, which can help decrease the emissions. And the second circular business model that we looked at was designing from upgradability, which is of course closely linked with the previous one, the product as a service, which means that from the beginning, designing a product to be able to maintain and upgrade it so that it will always be up to date with the newest and best energy efficiency will also help to decrease the emissions during the lifetime. So that was the two business models that we focused on, and maybe there are more. We would love to hear from you if there are any other business models that you see that could help alleviate this dilemma. And then the last thing that we looked at is how to be able to alleviate the cost of transitioning to circular business models. Of course, there are a lot of things that are very costly these days regarding sustainability, all the reporting. It's a lot of work and cost, and just choosing greener material. There are a lot of things that can represent higher costs, and then it will be beneficial economically in the longer run. So looking to change the business model to a more circular model, there are some costs related to that, but a way to maybe decrease it as much as possible is to start with a smaller pilot scale projects to test the feasibility and the consumer response, and then gradually refine the model, and then at the end to implement more full scale. That will allow the gradual investment and reduce the initial financial risk regarding this. And then also to look into if there are any governmental incentives or subsidies that will help and that will support these sustainable practice and the circular economy implementation. So this will not only help you with the dilemma itself, but just also want to lastly mention here that, of course, a lot of the new sustainability regulations are calling for more circularity, and also with the market becoming more and more aware of this could also strengthen just the marketing of the products to become more circular. So these three challenges were the one that I wanted to mention. And again, just really encourage you to download the brief and have a look at it. And then I will just invite my colleague Janus to tell you a little bit more about how you can report on the avoided emissions.
Thanks so much, Fanny. Before we hand over the word to Janus, I also just want to say that if you as a participant feel like that approaching this dilemma goes in many different directions, you're absolutely right. There are many ways to approach this dilemma. And Fanny, some of the things you mentioned with circularity, we also heard from companies where it doesn't really solve the problem. So no matter how much virgin material they replace with recycled material, they're not going to reduce their use phase emissions. And on the other hand, we had sort of a division between companies selling products B2C and companies selling B2B, these components manufacturers, and they're also going to be experiencing this dilemma from many in a very different way. I think that data is sort of everybody can agree that it's difficult obtaining data and obtaining the accurate data and thus also reducing them. But that's just what I wanted to mention, that it is sort of a list of different ways to approach this dilemma. You will be, I mean, depending on which company you come from, you will be approaching this dilemma in many different ways.
Absolutely.
Good morning. I think I'll take it from here. Yes, and my name is Johannes Kirkeby. I'm head of department for circularity, resources, and health. We changed our name, so it's a bit different than what Joachim mentioned before, but that's just a minor thing. I've been working with life cycle assessment and product development and so on for many, many years. And I'm going to talk about durability and avoided emissions. But before that, I'll just talk a bit about eco-design, a bit about, because actually the main purpose for all of us in companies are to develop and produce good products. And I'm not using sustainable products because I don't believe that there's any products that we can define as sustainable. We can define maybe products more sustainable or more environmental friendly than others, but in all products, they will have some impact. And when we design products, we think about a lot of things. Of course, the functions and the quality and the usability and design and so on, but also about durability. If we look into eco-design, we want to produce products that are durable and have by that less impact. We will like to avoid chemicals and exposure of these to our users. There are a lot of choices about materials. Some materials have a higher impact than others, and volume and weight, of course, also will have an environmental impact. And packaging, distribution, and then of course the use phase, and here especially products that use energy, either electricity or fuel or other types of energy. They can have a significant impact in the use phase. And of course we have the end of life phase, which we also have to think about: can this product be reused, redesigned, or recycled, or can it not even be recycled? So a lot of issues, and it's a balance weighing all the environmental factors towards the functionality and quality of the products. So having this in mind, then companies that need to report on the CO2 and the greenhouse gas emissions, and maybe you can switch to the next slide, Fanny. And you probably all know this graph in one way or the other. And the issue is, of course, in category, what is it, 11 or 13, I can't remember, about the use of soap products, that we need to include the emissions from the use. And again, products using energy especially will be very have a significant impact from this. And if we take the next slide, then we can just see what is it that we have to think about for category 11, emissions from the use phase. It's mandatory to have the direct use phase emissions, so that is energy and fuels and feedstocks that is used for the product. And there may also be other greenhouse gases that can be formed or emitted during use. And that can be cooling agents and so on. There's also an indirect use phase, which is optional. So there's some examples: washing and drying of clothes and so on. So that can be included. However, what is not included in this use phase is the avoided emissions. So whatever you believe is avoided, that's not part of category 11. So this is only the direct and maybe the indirect use phase. Yeah, and then you can take the next slide. And of course, we all know this product. This may not have a very big impact in the use phase. It may be rinsed once every 5 or 10 years, maybe washed with water and soap, but basically this is a very durable product. I think we all can nod to that. but without a very significant use phase. So here we might not have the problem, and durability will involve, hopefully, that the scope 3 will not be very significant for category 11. However, we have another product which may have a significant use phase. This product is known to be very long-lived and very durable, but at some point, because it uses fuel, new technology will beat the old product and durability. So at some point, it might not make sense from an environmental perspective to continue to use this product. But still, we need to have in mind that we would like to produce durable products, and one way of documenting is to try to claim some emissions intensity metrics. So what is the emissions per service, or in this case, it could be for a driven kilometer, it could be for 1 hour of operation or whatever. So this is one way of showing that because you have a durable product, it might last many years, but and then will have a high impact. But then maybe document that the emissions per product use is not so high. So that's a bit about durability. If we look into the avoided emissions of products, some products may involve avoided or reduced emissions in the use phase. And here we meet the first challenge is, what is the baseline? What is the standard? How should we calculate that? And what is the reference scenario we should calculate on? And of course, as shown, we cannot report this in scope 1, 2, and 3. I think the next slide, please. The GHG Protocol and the SBTi corporate manual clearly states that avoided emissions occurring outside the product's life cycle cannot be included in scope 1, 2, and 3. So this has to be reported separately, and this is very important that you cannot include it in this one, in this reporting. But you can do it on the side, you may say, as an addition to the GHG protocol. And there is help out there. So the next slide, please. There are some manuals and guidelines. And the World Resources Institute has this guideline. The World Business Council for Sustainable Development also has a guideline on how to report and calculate avoided emissions. And first of all, before you start doing this, you should ensure that you have your scope 1, 2, and 3, that they are clearly and accurately reported. So you should have that before you start calculating the avoided emissions. Also, don't compare any avoided emissions to scope 1, 2, and 3. That will just blur the picture. So they are two separate set of numbers. Also, don't have overlapping claims. So don't have emissions both in scope 1, 2, and 3, and actions that is part of the avoided emissions. So they should be clearly distinguished from each other. Also, if there are any trade-offs with, for example, other environmental impacts than greenhouse gas impact, please identify that. That could be something with biodiversity or other environmental impacts, resource consumption, and so on. There could also be some rebound effects that should also be identified. Yeah, and then have a transparent reporting. So have a report both the positive and the negative impacts, saying what is contributing and what is actually saving emissions. Next slide, please. When you do start the counting for the avoided emissions, then first of all, what is the purpose of this? What is it we want to show? This can also be impacting which approach that we want to use. Is it the consequential life cycle assessment approach or the attributional life cycle approach? Both can be used, but they may have different pros and cons. What is the baseline or the reference system? On the right, we can see, I mean, historical, there might be one type of emission, one trend, and then if you implement a new product or a new solution, you may reduce that, but it may not be compared to the historical because maybe that's old technology. So what is the reference scenario? Where would that lie? And that is the really difficult question to answer here. And that is case by case. You have to define that. What's the product scope, product lifecycle scope? And here it is important to include all stages from materials, production, use phase, and end of life, because you may invest more in one part and then have the benefits in another part. You should also identify the temporary scope and the geographical scope. So what is the time horizon and where are we in the world? Electricity mixes, for example, they are very different in different countries. And if it's a product using a lot of electricity, this can impact this phase. Yes, next slide. I think this is the final slide from me. Just summing up the recommendations. And first of all, if you report on avoided emissions, transparency and clarity are keywords here. You need to ensure transparency, so it's easy to see what is the assumptions, what are the data assumptions behind. So it's clear to see how this is calculated. Also ensure that your staff is trained and guided in doing this. So so you avoid making calculations that are not correct, basically. Also use precise language. This is precise and technical language. It's okay here. I think it's very good. So you are very certain that this is what we are saying, this is what we are comparing. So very precise and technical specific language we recommend. Then be cautious about terms like sustainable and green and so on. I would avoid these types of words, but just be, again, accurate and keep to the metrics. Also avoid comparing with the competitors and other specific products that can just get you in trouble. Also, if it's possible, get your calculations verified by a third party. That always increases the validity of the numbers. And then expand beyond GHG considerations. Again, think about rebound effects, think about biodiversity and other environmental impacts and sustainable indicators. So there's no negative effects on that. I think that's what I would like to say today. And then,
thanks so much, Janus. Thanks so much for going through these very good tips and tricks when it comes to avoided emissions, and also just to bring everybody on the same page. Obviously, we dive into avoided emissions not because it can solve this dilemma directly, but as a tool for demonstrating climate action outside of the greenhouse gas protocol. So it's a way to, even though it's difficult to reduce use-phase emissions, there are other ways to communicate and demonstrate to your stakeholders that you are actually that you are taking climate action as a company. And that's just another example of how you can go about solving this dilemma, or at least addressing it. Time is running. Once again, thank you, Janus and Fanny, for enlightening us on these specific issues. now I want to pass the word over to Sophie from Nilfisk, and hopefully, I know that Sophie, that you have some great inputs directly from Nilfisk on this dilemma, which will hopefully contextualize it a bit more.
Thank you, Joachim. Can you hear me well?
Yes, and I can see your slides.
Perfect. Hi, everyone. I'm Sophie Spes, working as a senior sustainability specialist in Nilfisk. And I'm going to talk a bit about the challenges we faced with the dilemma presented by Joachim, and how we tackle it at Nilfisk. So I will start with a short introduction of the company. So it's Nilfisk is an old company, 117 years old. It was created by Fisker Nielsen in Denmark in 1906. So Fisker Nielsen gave the name of Nilfisk, and we are specialized, let's say, in the production manufacturing of cleaning equipment. In Denmark, we are very famous for vacuum cleaners, and people remember about the old vacuum cleaners that their grandparents still have in the cupboard. So it's a company that has durability really as a core focus since many years. Today, vacuum cleaners for consumers represent a small share of our business, and it's now more focused on B2B sales with 3 segments. So vacuum cleaners, but also high pressure washers and floor care machines, like these big machines that you can see in hospitals, schools, supermarkets, etc. So to give you a bit of background on the work of Nilfisk regarding to emissions, so we have scope 3 targets since 2022. So when we submitted and got our target approved by SBTi, so we based our scope 3 target on the materiality assessment, knowing that at the time of submission, our scope 3 emissions were mainly represented by the use of sold products, over 92% today, at the time 95%. And so we decided to submit this target in 22 to reduce by 48% the intensity emissions of use of sold products compared to 21 by 2030. So the dilemma we faced it already at the time when we dig into the calculation, and when we presented it to our product managers and R&D, it was immediately spotted that there was something that was not in line with what is expected from the European Commission regarding product lifetime. So the formula that is in the GHG Protocol standard is that lifetime emissions of sold products should be calculated as energy consumed per use times the number of uses during the product lifetime, time the number of products sold, and time emission factor for electricity or fuel. So you can see clearly here that if the lifetime increases, so the number of uses during product lifetime, then your lifetime emissions will increase as well. On paper, the GHG protocol presents very clear goals on scope 3 emissions calculation. So it should be used as a way to identify hotspots in the company's value chain and prioritize efforts across the value chain to set targets and to quantify and report performance over time. It's also an important goal of the GHG protocol is that scope 3 emissions calculation and reporting should enhance stakeholder information and corporate reputation through public reporting. And in our view, this is not fully fulfilled by the way we are asked to report on Scope 3 emissions. And this is because we only report Scope 3 emissions as a black box. And in our opinion, this is not enough to enhance stakeholder information on the drivers of Scope 3 emissions. In the standards, the GHG Protocol recognizes this challenge. So there is a small box on product lifetime and durability, where they acknowledge that companies that prolong product lifetime are penalized because Scope 3 emissions will increase. So what they advise is to use additional metrics on a voluntary basis, for example, intensity metrics per hour of use or per functional unit. So it is something that they do acknowledge, but the problem is that it's on a voluntary basis that companies would disclose these additional metrics. And that's an issue because in practice, companies doing the right thing might see their emissions increase. So there is no requirement to report on the individual elements that drives performance. So it's a black box. It's a one single number that companies are required to report. And this single number might be misleading for investors and customers. And so in our view, doesn't really enhance information. So on one hand, we have regulators, nonprofits, and consumers that want to switch from less energy efficient product to more energy efficient products, and to short lifetime products to longer lifetime products. But on the other hand, we get penalized if on one hand we win market shares with more energy efficient products. So if we increase the number of products we sell by simply taking market share, but with a more efficient product, and then if we increase our product lifetime as well. The counter argument to that is that the Scope 3 emissions, as presented by the GHG Protocol standard, should show trade-offs between categories. So if we see an increased category 11, so emissions from use of sold products, then due to lifetime increase, then we should see a trade-off in other categories that should show their emissions decrease. In practice, it's not that obvious because first of all, you need perfect information on all your other categories, which is usually not the case. It is very difficult to quantify, for example, category 1 purchase goods and services in a way that allows to show granularity and effect of selling less product, for example. And you also have a time delay. So if you at a specific year start to sell longer lifetime products, then you will see this effect only within 5-10 years, depending on the lifetime of your product. So what can we do to tackle this dilemma? We saw during the 2 workshops that were organized that transparency came back as a key lever to allow enhancing information related to companies' performance, and to allow to kind of open this black box that Scope 3 emissions are today. So these are 2 screenshots of the brief that was published, and then recommending to increase transparency related to emissions. So how can we increase transparency? There could be a quite theoretical way is to break down the equation into smaller chunks. So we would remove factors, for example, to show more the effects of each of those factors on the total emissions. There are other ways, such as analyzing, for example, emissions, so reporting yearly emissions instead of lifetime emissions, so that would remove this lifetime factor. So there are different ways we could use intensity metrics per product categories, for example, as recommended by the GHG Protocol. And so in NIFISC, we are working very much on understanding the drivers and being transparent on what drove the emission development between one year to another. But this is only possible if internally you are able to identify those drivers. So we are doing internal work on better understanding the drivers internally first. So we have different parameters in our product emissions calculation that would affect our annual Scope 3 emissions. Obviously, volume, product mix, so the fact to sell more or less high-emitting products, energy efficiency improvement, grid effect, and hopefully soon lifetime increase. We are also working on disaggregating emissions per product categories to be able to show in a more granular way how different product categories impact our emissions. So this internal work is feeding our external reporting. So this year we improve our transparency on the reasons for development of our emissions. So we disaggregated our intensity metric for Scope 3 emissions, use of sold products. So we showed what was the weight of absolute emissions development over the gross profit development and what explained the decrease of intensity emissions. And we also have a quite extensive section on accounting policies for environmental data with almost a full page on Scope 3 calculation, where we really try to show the main hypotheses, databases, assumptions, etc., that we are using in our Scope 3 calculation. And this Scope 3 emissions were audited by a third party this year. In addition to this, comes the difficulty to document and prove improvements made. So what external stakeholder wants is to see that emissions are decreasing because of the right reasons, right? So you want to see emissions decrease because you sell less emitting products and you sell more higher efficiency product. But you need to have a basis to prove that this is indeed the reason for emissions decrease. And today there is a lack of standard that makes it difficult to provide evidence on increased, decreased lifetime and on improved energy efficiency. So we are working also internally to develop internal standards to measure energy use against machine performance.
We need to round off, Sophie. Sorry, 10 more seconds.
My last slide. We are working on this internal standard to be able to feed into our Scope 3 calculation, which will allow documenting this emission decrease from energy efficiency improvements. And that was it from my side.
Thanks so much, Sophie, and apologies that it had to be that we're running out of time. There's so much to cover in this topic, and if you feel if you have a meeting to go to, please feel free to leave the meeting. We will be sharing the recording of this webinar afterwards. But no, so many things to discuss in this. You mentioned, Sophie, yourself, that the Greenhouse Gas Protocol has actually acknowledged that it is important for them to provide more guidance on how to deal with the use phase emissions. You mentioned intensity metrics, annualizing emissions. All of those things are discussed in the brief, and it's also sent to the Greenhouse Gas Protocol as direct inputs to the revision of the technical Scope 3 guidance. We're not going to be, we only had 2 questions in the chat. Thank you so much, Päivi and Nils. We don't have the time to answer them. in terms of the lease product, that would be for another time, Nils. I just want to quickly, before we say goodbye, to share once again that these briefs are out. Tomorrow we will be diving into supply engagement and how to cut emissions and increase adoption of greener materials. And on Thursday, we will be diving into the flag guidance from the SBTI. And you're very welcome to join those webinars as well and download the briefs. We have links here for you to register for those 2 webinars. And we also want just to put a few words on another climate series that we're going to do in May and June. We're going to once again pick up on some of the most biggest challenges, or at least frequently requested subjects. We've been talking about one of these subjects today, avoided emissions. That's going to be May 28. We're going to talk about market-based accounting for Scope 3. That's going to be the 21st of May. And then diving into the voluntary carbon market and beyond value chain mitigation. That's going to be in June the 11th. That is it. And finally, I also just want to mention that will be running Climate Ambition Accelerator. That is a 6-month program we're going to be running together in the Nordic region, and applications are open now, so you can apply for a position in the program. This is the 4th time that we're going to run it, and it's all about raising the ambitions when it comes to climate action. So no matter where you are on the climate journey, you will be able to participate in this program, and it's specifically designed to set science-based targets, both near-term and long-term science-based targets. That is it for me. Thank you so much for being part of this, for participating in this webinar, and I'm wishing you a very good day.